Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. This video we're going to keep looking at the Visions MTGO decks, and this time we're going to look at Unnatural Forces, which is a blue and black deck. Let's take a look at the deck list. We've got 17 creatures, 10 instants, 5 enchantments, 4 sorceries, 24 land, and mana curve off to the side there. Let's just dive in and start looking at this one. So, the one of the rares in the deck is Necro Savant, so 3 and triple black for a 5/5. It has an ability 3 and double black, sacrifice creature, put Necro Savant into play onto the battlefield, use the ability only during upkeep and only if Necro Savant is in your graveyard. So, yeah, we can just, if it's dead, we can happily sacrifice creature and just pop comes straight back into play, which is like that's not terrible. 5 mana that's always just gonna keep coming back as long as you keep sacrificing stuff, and it's like a 5/5, which was like pretty big for the time. So yeah, I don't think this is that terrible, honestly. This is kind of okay. And then what goes really nicely with it, obviously, is 2 Brood of Cockroaches. So 1 a black for a 1/1. If it's put into your graveyard if it dies, you can pay 1 life. And I don't know if it's May, actually. That's interesting. I didn't check that. I'm going to, because it doesn't say May here, I'm going to say it just you have to do it. Pay 1 life, and Brood of Cockroaches goes back to your hand at end of turn. So yeah, this you could just endlessly kind of like sacrifice the brood of cockroaches to keep replaying Necro Savant. If it just like keeps dying, if if your big 5/5 is somehow keeps dying, that sucks. But at least you have brood of cockroaches here. Also, like even if you don't need to sacrifice to Necro Savant, even just having it around, just permanently replaying it and like it dying and keep coming back is not terrible, Right, and then we have Necrotile, the first printing of Necrotile, and this is actually kind of a big thing, which we'll talk about. So Visions was the first set that actually had creatures with enters the battlefield effects, ETBs, or comes into play as it was then, and it just wasn't a thing. Obviously, it's a thing we take for granted these days. Obviously, all the time we get creatures with enter the battlefield effects, or as we're going to have, I think from Bloomburrow going forward, like at time recording, like they've had some previews of it. They've in future sets, it looks like it's going to be shorted down from enter the battlefield into just enters, and I'd love to hear what people think about that. Just to comment down below on your thoughts on that kind of shortening of the phrase. But yeah, it just hadn't been a thing up until now. This idea of like, oh, we could stick kind of like spell-like effects onto creatures that could activate when you play them, and that would be kind of fresh and crazy. And yeah, it definitely, I think, caused a stir at the time just to have creatures essentially casting spells, because Necrotile is doing terror essentially at sorcery speed while also attached to a body. So yeah, it was actually at the time quite an innovation. And I say it's just these days obviously we just take it for granted that pretty much every creature has a enter the battlefield of ability or something like that. So yeah. Necrotile, I think, is still like even by today's standards is kind of all right. 2 and double black for a 2/1 with first strike, and yes, when it comes into play, you destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature, and it can't be regenerated. So yeah, I thought that's kind of interesting to talk about that. And then 2 Mana War, which was like the other like really good ETB creature at the time. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 when it comes into play, return target creature to owner's hand, which again, still by today's standards, I think that's pretty good. Like 3 mana for a 2/2 that does unsummon when it comes in is not terrible. So yeah, really like both that and Necrotile are in this deck. I really like that. Then we've got a single Shrieking Drake, so 1 blue for a 1/1 with flying. When it comes into play, return a creature you control to owner's hand, so you can use this to reset Mana War or Necrotile. This is, I guess, kind of what like the ETB effects had been up till now, really. Like there were usually like drawbacks or extra costs. Like this one is like you have to bounce something you return to owner's hand, so it's essentially like an extra cost, unlike Mana War or Necrotile, which are just an extra like advantage. So yeah, I suppose that's where the difference lies. But yeah, Shrieking Drake is, I guess, okay in here, I say, because you can use it just to reset Mana War or Necrotile and play him again. Single Coral Fighters, 1 a blue for a 1/1. When it attacks and is not blocked, you can look at the top card of defending player's library, and you can choose to put that card on the bottom of that player's library. So yeah, you get to like surveil 1 on your opponent. Oh no, what was the one from Future Sight, Fate Seal or something? Yeah, that was the ability, wasn't it? Whereas it was kind of like you scried your opponent's deck. And yeah, this I suppose isn't terrible. I suppose, is it? I mean, sticking the ability on a 1/1 is kind of with no other like evasion or abilities is kind of not great. Normally, you probably just block this and be fine. But yeah, I think it's still okay. I think it's still like a handy little ability to have, and yeah, it'd be really good if they had like flying themselves maybe or something, so it could go off more reliably, or maybe island walk or something. But yeah, I think it's okay. Then we got two Kukemsa Serpents, so 3 in a blue for 4/3 with Island Home, which is this super old keyword. So Island Home is basically all drawback. So if defending player controls no islands, this creature cannot attack, and if you control no islands, it gets buried or sacrificed. Again, don't know why it's buried. I'm gonna keep mentioning it every time it comes up. It's weird that it's bury and not sacrifice, but anyway. But you can pay 1 blue and sacrifice an island to turn a land an opponent controls into an island turn. So you can swing with your 4/3 that has like no other abilities. And I always used to think that Island Home also implied that it had Island Walk, because that I guess like made sense to my brain. But like it's not, like it's still it can still be blocked and everything. So yeah, yeah, it's not great. Island Home is just pure downside. It's not even that great a creature. It's it's only a 4/3 for 4, which like I don't know. It's not great. Like blue definitely had better creatures at this cost, like with sort of like reasonable stats at the time. So yeah, kind of annoyed that this was included actually. We've got two Water Spout Djinn. Speaking of creatures with drawbacks, 2 in double blue for 4/4 with flying. So air elemental, but 1 cheaper. But during your upkeep, return untapped island you control to owner's hand, or again bury water spout elemental. So yep, just keeps returning a untapped island back to hand every turn to keep them around. In that regard, I suppose it's very similar to Zendikar's like Living Tsunami. But that was at least in a set that cared about like returning lands to your hand so you could play them again and get landfall triggers. Here, this is just kind of like an undercosted like big flyer, so I suppose it's okay. But yeah, it's still a bit of a pain. Then we've got 2 Fetid Horrors, 3 in a black for a 1/2. It's a shade, so it just has the shade ability. Yeah, it's fine, just kind of expensive. 2 Restless Dead, which is just a straight reprint of Drudge Skeletons. So obviously I love them because they're a cheap creature with cheap regeneration. And then a single Zombie Mob, 2 in double black. There are 2 naught. They come into play with 1/+1/+1 counter for every creature card in your graveyard, but then you exile all your creature cards from your graveyard. Which is, I mean, this could potentially be quite big. I suppose. I'm trying wondering like what the minimum would be for, like to justify it 4 mana. I suppose you want to get like 3 out of this, don't you? So then it's like a 5/3. I suppose that would be okay if like for 4 mana at the time. Maybe it's okay. And then non-creature spells got a single boomerang, lovely classic boomerang, double blue, to return a permanent to owner's hand. So it can also hit lands if you want to be that guy and just essentially do blue's version of land destruction. Yeah, this is just really great. Like two man to bounce anything is obviously fantastic, I think. A single flooded shoreline, so double blue enchantment. You can pay 2 blue, return 2 islands you control to owner's hand. Just notice the thing, there's like a real thing of using islands as a resource in here, like either returning them back to hand for the Djinn, or sacrificing from the serpent, or now here you like returning 2 islands to use this ability. So yeah, double blue, return 2 islands you control to owner's hand, return a creature to owner's hand. So it is reusable. Obviously, that is, I think, quite a steep cost to play, setting yourself back 2 land drops just to bounce a creature. But again, if it like wins you the game, like I kind of say with these abilities a lot, it's better to have it and then not use it than need it and not have it, I suppose. But yeah, it is a pretty steep cost to pay, I think. And then 2 Etherwell, 3 in a blue, put target creature on top of owner's library. If it's red, you can put it on the bottom instead. So this is okay. I think like 4 mana, like instant speed, time ebb, that's okay. With the extra kind of like color hate, I suppose. It's okay. Single vision charm, single blue. So it's a charm, so it's got 3 options. You choose one. An artifact phases out, which I think is going to be super niche, or a player mills 4, which is okay. Like for until like we got like Tome Scour and like M10, this was like the go-to like cheap like mill spell. Or all lands of one type of basic lands of your choice until end of turn. So actually, you could do because it's not all lands you control, it is all lands of one type, so you could potentially do this to like screw over an opponent's turn, like turn all their like mountains into forests or something, like make them unable to essentially cast spells for a turn. That would be kind of thing. And also it works with, I guess it's such a janky combo with the serpent, like you turn all your opponent's lands into islands and then it can attack, I suppose. Not the best use of it, and there's only one in the deck anyway. I think most of the time you just use it for the mill effect. Single Ray of Command, 3 in a blue, untap target creature and opponent controls, and gain control of it until end turn. It has haste, and yeah, so it's Act of Treason. It's a classic. It's the original Act of Treason, but one more, and instant speed. And instant speed actually makes it really good because then you can steal an attacker and then turn it into a blocker, and then potentially like 2 for 1. So that's okay. And then 2 Sealed Fate, X blue and a black. Look at the top X cards of target opponent's library, exile 1 and put the rest back on top in any order. So I'm not huge on this, just because like you have to sink potentially like a lot of mana into it. And, like it does nothing to affect the board, or like your opponent's hand or anything. Like, I mean, yeah, you could like stack their deck, so like they're just gonna like maybe get shit draws for like the next few turns, but like I don't know. I'm not wild on this. And potentially you exile 1, and like yeah, there's always like the dream scenario you exile like their one really really good card, but yeah, I think it's just too unreliable and like too expensive to like really bother with. So yeah, not a fan of it. And then sort of like a bit more reliable control, I think. 2 Enfieldments, double black to give a creature -2/-2. That's okay. 2 Coercions, 2 in the black. You look at an opponent's hand and you choose a card from the discard. So that's okay, I think, as well. And then 2 Necromancies. So absolute, the Oracle text on this one is wild. Just because it's kind of like the animate dead thing, where it has to be written in like crazy magic-ese to actually make it work within the rules. But Necromancy, 2 in a black, you can choose to play it as an instant, and if you do, bury it end of turn. So basically, anytime you play it, and when a sorcery couldn't be played, it's like one of these Mirage block like flash enchantments that like in the rules update it got substance, and it's a whole mess. But yeah. So when you cast Necromancy, choose a creature card in any graveyard. When Necromancy comes into play, put that creature in play as though it was just played, and Necromancy becomes an aura that targets the creature. So you can imagine the Oracle text on this to make it work in today's rules. It's insane. So yeah, so you target a creature in any graveyard, you get it onto your side. Necromancy then becomes an aura that goes on that creature, and then, but if the Necromancy ever gets destroyed, then the creature also gets destroyed. Well, again, it's bury, not sacrifice. Actually, I need to look up if it's been updated, because if it's just bury, if you again play with more modern cards, you find a way to make it indestructible, then I don't think you would have to destroy it, because it's bury is destroyed without regeneration. But if you made it indestructible, then the destroy effect doesn't work. So yeah, that's interesting. But in regards to Necromancy, I think is actually really fantastic, and I think it goes for quite a bit of money actually, just because it's essentially a 3-mana reanimation spell that can target any graveyard, which is pretty good. I remember I got like a set of them back in the day when they were like fairly cheap, and yeah, I think they go for quite a lot now, just because they obviously think it's probably become more popular because of like Commander and stuff like that. So yeah, really nice card, I think, to include. And then a single Funeral Charm. So choose one. Target player chooses and discards a card, which for only 1 black mana actually is pretty good. Just discard 1 for 1 black is okay. Or a creature gets +2/-1 till end of turn, so it's nice that it's a buff or like a kill an X1. Or a creature gets Swamp Walk until end of turn. So yeah, I would say probably most of the time it's going to be like that first one, the discard, but also like the little buff option is not terrible. And then 2 Impulses, famously with like the wrong text, or not the wrong text, but like text that got erratared out. So 1 in a blue, you look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 1 of them to your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library, and then this is the text that shouldn't be there. Shuffle your library afterwards. So it was completely pointless putting them on the bottom of your library. Modern printing of this now don't have, because it has been like in modern sets. Obviously, you just don't have the shuffle your library afterwards bit, because it renders putting stuff on the bottom of your deck completely irrelevant. But yeah, I think it's still a good card. Like 2 mana's like to look at the top 4, pick 1, and then get rid of the rest. I think that's actually pretty good. And then 2 Inspirations, 3 in blue, instant speed, draw 2 cards, which is like fine. And then 12 Islands and 12 Swamps. So let's quickly talk about what could have been. Like overall, I think it's actually okay. It's got like it's got like the foundations of a fairly okay like blue-black like control deck that wins through kind of like biggest creature in the sky. You got the Waterspout Djinn, and also just killing stuff like with Necrotal or bouncing stuff. And yeah, I think it's decently okay. But what I would have liked to seen in here, I think Undo is like, it's a real shame Undo's not in here, because it's really good. 1 and double blue to return 2 creatures to one's hand, and like yeah, it's sorcery speed, but I just have a weakness for any card that lets you bounce more than one thing. So yeah, I think at least 1 do in here would have been good. Urborg Mindsucker as well, I guess was a potential card. So 2 in the black for a 2/2. You can pay a black. and an opponent discards a card at random. The random discard actually makes it, I think, quite interesting. So yeah, that could have been here. And also, huge missed opportunity. It's a blue-black deck with a sort of control theme, and we don't have Mundungu. So one a blue and a black for a 1/1. Taps to counter a spell unless the controller pays an extra 1 mana and 1 life. So really, really like decent little creature. I think it's kind of just to have this repeatedly, tapping it like you're going to pay the 1, you're going to pay the 1 and like 1 life as well. Just kind of like chip someone down. Like even if they do pay the extra 1 and 1 life, you've still chipped them down a little bit. You've made them spend extra mana. So yeah, real shame that Mundungu was not included in this. So yeah, overall, I think it's like pretty good. I think it's better than the last one we looked at. Just I think for the inclusion of like stuff like Necrotal and Man of War, who are just really like iconic creatures from Visions. Overall, all right, basically. Obviously some room for improvement, but that's all the decks, isn't it? But I'd love to know what you think about this one. If you've got any thoughts or stories or comments, opinions, stick a comment below. I'll give it a read like I always do. But I'll be back next time going to look at the last deck from Visions. So hope you join me for that. But until then, thanks for watching and listening, and have a great day.